Yeah, all of your backdrops look way nicer than mine. I'm like really liking the plants and yeah, the colors and the not car.
Greetings all. As we're coming in, just let me know in the chat box where you're coming from or where you're calling from. Be starting soon. Toronto, Columbus, Ohio, North Florida, Juju's here from El Paso, New Orleans, Nurse Midwife from Lancaster, Washington State. We got Queens, New York in the building, Full Spectrum Doula from Seattle, Colorado Springs, Charlotte, North Carolina, Lexington, Kentucky, Austin, Texas, Warren, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Queens. Anybody from Brooklyn? I feel like Brooklyn's been quiet today. More Queens, DMV by the way of Chicago. Austin, Texas. Oh, we're from Harlem. Good. Greetings, all. Thank you for joining us today in the Art of Homebirth Midwifery. My name is F.A. Osarin. I am the founder of Doula Chronicles. I am also a student midwife and a doula / young midwife as well. If you were part of the panel yesterday when we discussed the difference between student midwifery and young midwifery. Welcome. Reproductive Futurism is a virtual gathering in honor of the work of Lorretta Ross and Octavia Butler have done for us and following in their footsteps. We're going to be dreaming and creating a future around what pregnancy and birth can look like. As birth workers, we're often on the front lines of the maternal health crisis. We witness near misses, health crisis, my mouth is all over today. We witness near misses, mistreatment from healthcare staff, and objective violence. Grieving and mourning is a part of our work, but so is creating anew where it didn't exist before. We'll be using this space to share with your comrades on what the future can look like. And as said by one of our favorite elder midwives, Jenny Joseph, we are in the business of saving lives. Good afternoon, good afternoon. I'm here with Sophia, Rasha, Takiya, and Ray. In the chat box, their bios are going to be posted by my lovely friend, Lindsay Bliss. Please use the Q&A box to answer for questions and use the chat box for just mostly interacting with the staff, interacting with your panelists today. I'm gonna start with, how's your heart? How are you feeling? Anyone can go first. How are you feeling? How's your body?
Are you asking our panelists?
Yeah. Sorry, I realized I was going into the rant of the intro.
Well, that's okay. Right now, I have a little pinch in my back right now, so physically, I'm doing okay. I wish that this nerving back pain would go away, but that's, you know, a symptom of backbending work for 17 years. However, I am doing well, and I'm enjoying being in this space that I'm in currently as a midwife. And I'm excited to be here today to offer whatever information, whatever words of wisdom, or just encouragement to anyone who's participating today. So I'm excited and glad to be here.
Thanks. So my first question to pop this off with is, why home birth? Why did you choose home birth? And I know some of you started off in the hospital and then transitioned to home birth. as well.
Well, I started out in the hospital because I had apprenticed with a home birth midwife that was unlicensed. And she was a political midwife in the sense that she was choosing to be unlicensed, even though she had completed midwifery education. And so I thought, well, let me just see this other way of doing midwifery. And during my time in the hospital, I was a nursing student, and then I was an employee of the hospital. I was what they call a CNA, Certified Nurse Assistant. But I was privileged to float through labor and delivery, postpartum, surgical births, the intensive care unit. And I just felt so powerless. I felt like I couldn't do my best work, be my best self, and show up for families the way that I really wanted to if I stayed in that space. And I was young. I was just on the other side of 21 when I started. And so it felt like the right move for me to support families in home birth. And, you know, after seeing so many families have beautiful home births and seeing probably a third of the Black community that came into that hospital be treated really, really well, but 2/3 of the same population be treated really, really poorly, and feeling like I was incapable of stopping it. And seeing a future of me doing a lot of headbutting with administration and being in trouble about that, trying to be protective over my people. That's how I came to be in home birth. I was fortunate enough to see both in my family. There were midwives that worked in hospitals and there were midwives that worked at home. And so I never felt that one was better than the other. I really did make the choice out of like, kind of like jeans, like these ones fit really good on me and look really good on me and I could get the most done in them. And that's how it works for me.
I think for me, I always wanted to be a midwife, but one of the biggest things that challenged me to leave the hospital setting was I was getting in trouble. I mean, I was the rebel. I was telling the nurses, you know, don't put that monitor on.
I feel like that's gonna happen to me.
I was the midwife, you know, having a pact with the nurse that says, you know what, she's gonna stand and squat. Oh, she has to, I'm gonna go to the bathroom with her. Oops, there's a baby. You know, I was that midwife to the point where what ended up happening in my first job, I was there for about 4 years, and I started to realize that there was basically a witch hunt against me from even my own employers. And there were people going, you know, people that I thought I could trust, right? Going back and really making those complaints and saying that, you know, I wasn't adhering to policies and procedures while I was, you know, providing safe care and allowing women to, and just birthing people in general to just decide what they wanted and upholding that. I was told, you know, I either needed to, you know, straighten up or resign. And so I told them, you know, in so many nice professional words, peace out. Don't want to be here, you know, and I walked away. And it was a really hard time in my life because I was only 26 years old at that time. I started midwifery at 23. And here I am, a single woman with a child and literally living on my own. I was like, oh, you know, how do I make this work when I have a kid that I need to provide for? So I was burned out at that point. At 3 years in, I was probably somewhere around 350 births, having been a new grad and working, you know, anywhere from a 60 to 80 hour week. And I was literally burned out. I didn't see my kid. He was falling behind in school. And so I took a whole year off and lived off of savings and got myself together, got my head straight, helped my son excel, you know, and moved on. So it was challenging. I was forced to leave that environment because I was being true to myself and true to my heart and true to my clients, and it wasn't received well. So that was a really difficult time in my life.
For me, I started off as a doula in New York City, and I think I've been about going to birth for about 2 years before I went to my first home birth. And the difference was like night and day. And I didn't realize birth could look the way that it did at home, and that I'd seen unmedicated birth in the hospital, but I had never seen someone not be futzed with and not, been like just the way that birthing people had to work around the needs of the hospital instead of like the care providers working around the needs of the birthing person. And I was just like, for me, like a light bulb click that I was like, oh, like this is what I have to do. Like being a doula for me felt like being like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. And I was like, if I do home birth, then I can actually provide the alternative. And if hospitals have to compete with this, they're going to have to treat people better. And it kind of, it took me about 1.5 years, 2 years to try and figure out which way to train and to train inside the hospital system without. And ultimately, I felt so convinced that I needed to train with normal birth, with birth that wasn't being futzed with. And that I had been I had a lot of trauma from things I had witnessed in the hospital, and I didn't want to train in an environment where residents could swoop in, or in an environment that was more medicalized, and I'd have to unlearn that. So the CPM path just made the most sense to me, even though it was really scary to do.
For me, it's like all the same as you all. I experienced a fair degree of burnout. I did doula work for 4 years before becoming a midwife, and just being in hospitals was not, I just didn't, I kept seeing my clients come up against this thing where they were like trying to ask for what they wanted, and every time they would ask for it, they would just get like redirected. It was like the kind of fight that they had to do. There's just it's so common that like clients are in hospitals fighting just to get like really basic parts of their birth plan followed. Like I'm thinking about like having these experiences with delayed cord clamping where they're like, okay, and it's delayed now, right? Let's just cut it now. Like I've never really seen it actually be truly delayed. And just like having wanting my clients to have autonomy and wanting to have autonomy as a provider, I was like, I'm done with trying to work within this system where you can only really do this much. And it's like, it's really good for when you really need it. But when you don't, like, I want to be able to use herbs. I want to be able to use homeopathy. I want to be able to like create my own protocols and like help my clients make the best decisions for their bodies. So like for their value system, not like be corralled into one particular way that like is this blanket thing that supposedly every single person will fit under, which they don't. Everybody's an individual. So yeah, for me, it was really about autonomy and about burnout and about like good lighting and good snacks at home.
Speaking of autonomy, what is your average day as a home birth provider look like?
It depends on the day.
I guess let me say this then. So just your average day as going through what could happen during that day as you're, let's say it's a Monday morning. Maybe you just came back from a birth, maybe you're heading to a birth, how your prenatals look, what does office work look like? Are you dropping off placentas, picking up drugs? What does that look like as someone who is trying to move into home birth?
I think the piece that isn't discussed enough when people are initially interested in midwifery, and this is just my own thought, I would love to hear everyone else's thought, but I just feel like what's not discussed enough is that this is a lifestyle. Like it's not just a job, it's not just work that we do, it's a lifestyle, and like everyone close to us, intimately close to us, is affected by all the work that we do. And I am constantly in a place of managing my home life, my midwifery life, my children's lives, my personal life, and then there's the business of it and like keeping the business afloat. And there's just so many working parts to it. For myself, you know, COVID has shifted a lot. I have a 16-year-old, almost 14-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So the morning starts with making sure that the Wi-Fi is up and working for everyone to be on their Zoom calls. And if I am coming in from a birth, after a certain hour, I don't know about y'all, but after a certain hour, it's just like, well, I might as well just be up and keep working. So it's like, I'm probably haven't slept, but I have to find the strength. I have to pull it together. I have to still move about my day. So once the children are settled, then I'm in my own Zoom telemidwifery meetings. I'm responding to clients' emails, potential clients' emails. I'm managing phone calls. Due to COVID, I'm only seeing one family a day to reduce exposure. And so that makes for a very long week, just one family a day. But that day is like literally chock full of Zooms and then phone calls and troubleshooting. And then still I have a child jumping in the camera every once in a while. She's outside with the chickens right now, but like, then it's like trying to remain professional while parenting, and then having to continue to support the clients enough that they feel okay when I say, I'm really sorry, I have to reschedule our appointment, I'm headed to a birth. And then they say, well, okay, well, when are you gonna get back to me? And it's like, after they have their baby. So it's a lot of like, I give thanks that I got my first job at 15 and a half. That was all about customer service, because home birth midwifery is a lot of customer service and making sure people are like, everything's okay. I'm going to disappear for who knows how many days.
I would imagine they would understand that you would do the same when they're going into labor.
I would love for someone else to expand on that.
Yeah, customer service is, I mean, it's so true. I didn't imagine how much admin also that I'd have to do as a home birth midwife. Like, and I find too that I'm a single person with no kids, so it's, I think, a lot easier for me than what you're describing, like managing a whole family and stuff. But yeah, for me, like even when I had like a 2-day birth a couple days ago, like 2 full nights missed of sleep, and the amount of time that it took me just to like catch up, everything had to get pushed back, and then I was just like, I couldn't do anything for myself, and just catching up with my clients, and then you have to do like the meetings, the 1 day, the 3 day if they need it and stuff like that. So I guess I just wasn't prepared for, I don't know, all the time that I would be spent. I thought I was just going to be a midwife. I didn't think I would also like have to be a business person and be like making spreadsheets. Not my forte. Like I would have gone into a different profession maybe if I was really, really good at paperwork. So yeah, it's just kind of, that was a surprise. So I think a lot of my days also spent like looking at a screen, whether it be Zoom or like ordering different things online, and then constantly trying to stay on top of taxes, things like that. Yeah.
How has midwifery been as during the pandemic? What has had to change?
I do the same as Rasha, also the only seeing one client a day.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing clients less often in person. I do a lot of telehealth. Having clients get like their own blood pressure cuff, some urine sticks and things like that. That's kind of how I manage telehealth. And then, I don't know, going there in person, I do a lot of like COVID counseling actually the birth, so that, because once I'm there, I feel like I wear a mask and we all do the best that we can, but I feel like at that point, it's really hard when you're in someone's space for 24 hours and you're all breathing the same air to like really not share the air. So hopefully we're just protecting each other really well in the weeks before that, because I feel like exposure happens.
I feel like with COVID, like it definitely has made it harder to do like my job or our jobs. There was this really intense surge towards home birth at the beginning of the pandemic, and like my practice doubled in like 6 weeks, and it was nuts. And it felt really amazing to be part of a midwifery community that was like, we all like organized together and like basically created a fee structure so we could all like more actively back each other up and support each other. And we trained like 20 assistants because we stopped assisting each other at births, and we created a fund. Like I felt like it was like this amazing moment of like community organizing around midwifery that I had been like desperately craving. And also like I can't get records anymore. It's like a nightmare trying to get records, and it's like harder to order supplies. And I have an office that I see people in, and I don't have the, I think right now I'm doing like 20 hours of appointments a week. So I don't like, and half is online, but I have to like see people back to back and then like do all this cleaning. And it's just like more work and more isolation. It's like been harder to do. I definitely related to like that part of it being like a lifestyle, because it's just like, you know, you don't know what's going to happen. And you know, I have like a general, like this is around how many hours a week I do appointments, and this is around how many hours I spend tracking down records and following up on things. But then, you know, every so often, like a lot of work happens really quickly, and like, you know, like suddenly like you come home from birth and then there's like an actual emergency that you have to deal with, or yeah, and it totally, you know, affects the people around me. I had like a 3-day birth this summer, and you know, like every year I feel it a lot more. Like it's definitely like harder to recover from. And also like I was like, you know, a really crappy housemate for weeks after that, and like kind of only, I eat a lot of Chinese takeout when I'm that tired, and like stop cleaning up after myself. And then eventually I'm like, oh, I should like participate in the world, and I'm like, you know, not exempt from like participating in my family. But it's really hard when you feel really sorry for yourself for being really tired. To do that, and then like it's just like one thing in front of the other until you kind of get back to a more, yeah, I don't know, my equilibrium, I guess.
One of the things for me, I actually announced my retirement right before COVID. And when I did that, you know, I had, you know, my clients and people that I had known over the years, you know, say, no, don't leave. And so what I ended up doing, I got like, same as you, Ray, tons of calls. I think it was probably somewhere around 200 to 300 calls in that time frame. And what I ended up doing was helping another midwife practice launch, and I backed them up as their senior midwife while they launched. And so they're right now, within a few months of launching, they are running a full service practice that I gifted, you know, and gave them my, well, not gifted, I'm paid for that service, but I gave them all of my supplies, all of my furniture, my business model, my charting system, so that they could have an easier start to their practice. And in doing that,
that needs to happen more often.
In doing that gave me the piece that I needed to sort of segue and be okay with my segue. And then also it allowed me to invest in those midwives. And so I became their senior midwife during their launch year, and currently I'm still their senior midwife. So it took the worry from them of having to start a practice. It took a lot of those things that, you know, a lot of us when we're starting don't know anything about. And so they're under my support, and, you know, for gaining the clientele, so that clientele can say, okay, well, there's a senior midwife on board. And then secondly, the ins and outs of running a business and not killing yourself while you're doing it, because I'm an expert in how to kill yourself while you're doing it. So I know what to tell them not to do. And so some of the things that I've learned in terms of like managing my everyday while I was doing this was learning how to take the weight off of my shoulders of being responsible for patients. When people sign on to maternity care, midwifery care, especially under my care, they come on as a partner. And when they are partnering with me, that means that they get to decide, because it is their body, their decision, their baby, their family. I have no decision-making abilities at all, unless someone is without breath in their body and they need me to save their lives. And that is how I evolved over the time of being a midwife. I was not always that way. And so I make no decisions for families at all. The other thing that helped me was that part of that partnership includes them being educated. And so I do disseminate a lot of information via email with links and things like that. So it helps them to continue to be educated and know what topics need to be addressed and things of that nature. And then also also they have self-scheduling, and they know what supplies and and herbal remedies and things like that they should be able to do on their own. That alleviated a lot of stress. It alleviated a lot of the admin that I had to be responsible for. Whenever they got lab results or sonograms results, again, that was followed up with an email, and then I gave them the option, if they wanted to discuss it, that they could schedule appointments. And then I would just make sure that my appointment scheduler was up to date with my availability. Now, of course, clients always knew that, things were subject to change, and that the same, support and the same attention that I give every laboring person, it would be what they would get in return if I had to, reschedule, what have you. But they would get a simple, quick text, a blanket text, no questions asked, reschedule yourself. And I learned how to do that because me and burnout, we have a, on and off again relationship. I've been burned out and, re-energized, and burned out and re-energized. And I had to learn along the way what things worked for me and what things did not work for me. And so I had to put more responsibility on the patients, and rightly so. Historically in our society, we take everything away from them and tell them what to do. And so I needed to be able to give that back to them. And I haven't had any complaints, as they all appreciated that. And then it takes away from, again, that sense of urgency and responsibility that you have as a midwife. You're able to now really pay attention to the things that require your attention, and making sure that your patients are safely cared for. So those were some of the things that I did during COVID. Of course, we adopted, when I started the structure with the midwives, they literally launched at COVID. And so I had to teach them how to do consultations. I had to teach them all of those things. So I modeled a lot of that for them, and we just gradually transitioned. So we went to a virtual model as well, with what we call drive-bys. We have a 15-minute quick check-in, masked, where we just do fundal heights and listen to heart tones and just do the important things, and we're out. And so that's what we adopted for the time during COVID. And now those midwives are back up to doing in-office timeframes. Now, I've also encouraged them to schedule time off. So they have solid days in the week where they are almost doing nothing for their practice other than emergencies. And so I've taught them that admin does not need to be every day. There has to be days that you carve out for your peace, because your peace above all is what's important. So those are the things that I've been mentoring, and I have done in my own practice.
Oh, that's such great advice about burnout. And what other strategies? Oh, I think you were getting ready to speak, Rashad.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. I was like, yep, all of that, yep, that. I mean,
burnout has been a huge theme this whole conference.
I stopped working weekends just barely 16 years in. Where, like, I tell clients, I'm not available on the weekend unless you are in labor or having an emergency. I'm not answering emails on the weekend. I'm not responding to text messages on the weekend. Like, if it is not an emergency, I'm not available. I'm with my family, because when I'm with you as a client, I'm giving you everything. I am Anita Baker. You got the best of my love. Like, you got my 100% attention, so that my children even know, unless I'm bleeding, I'm not about to text mama. And so I had to do the same for myself. Just like Takiya was saying, I had to do the same for myself. I don't have alerts on my phone. My phone is just text messages only. I don't know when I'm getting an email. I don't know when someone is sending me a DM. I don't have any of that turned on, because number one, that's just additional stress. It's just something else reminding me or making me feel like I'm not doing enough. And I know that I am. And that was huge. That was huge. When I first had an opportunity to be in partnership with someone in midwifery, we both would take 1 month off a year where we were completely off the grid. And we worked really hard to set ourselves up so that when one would be off for the month, we had someone already trained up to assist us during that month while the partner was gone. And then when, we flipped it. Like, okay, now it's my turn to be off for the month, and literally just be completely gone. And that's challenging, specifically as a Black midwife, when you have Black clients that are like, I don't want anybody else except for you or another Black person. And so I think that contributes a lot to the pressures of being a midwife, specifically a midwife of color, a Black midwife, is that you feel like you can't take time away, because who else is going to come if there is not another Black midwife in the community, or another midwife in partnership, or someone who practices the same style way as you. I really appreciate what you said, Takiya, about making sure, you know, the clients have autonomy, that they have as much information as possible to make the decision that's best for them. But at the same time, you can't hand them off to a midwife that doesn't practice in that way and doesn't feel that way, so that you can get a break. So it really, it's a dance, and it's a curating. It's a curating of the practice that is going to sustain you. It's a curating of a practice that reflects like how you lived your life and how you want to show up for folks. And you know, reminding people, like living what it is that you're teaching to these clients, these people that are choosing to become parents and inviting you in that process. They are also looking to us as midwives as, you know, are you actually practicing what you preach? Are you drinking your 2 liters of water? Are you getting enough rest when you can? And I'm like, yeah, I am, but I'm also transparent when it's like, okay, so it's been 6 hours postpartum. I'm so happy you had this baby. Everything's good. Here's your postpartum notes.
Time to go.
Take a shower and I go to the next birth. It's been so good. And then letting the other person that's in labor know, I'm finishing up with someone else. I'm on my way. Would you like for someone else to come and be with you till I get there? Like, you know, still giving myself as much space and room to breathe in between each experience, not carrying stuff from other births and other appointments to the people, the births, the experiences that I'm showing up for. Like, all of it is about us sustaining ourselves and feeling good and living well in order to be able to offer that to the folks that are asking us to be on this journey with them.
I think at the end of the day, what we're all describing is some hella hard work. I mean, let's just say that. I mean, it's sacrificial. It's hard on our families. It's hard on our bodies. It's hard on our mental space. It's hard on our pockets. It's hard. And I don't think we pay enough time. I mean, how many of us have 401k plans and health insurance? How many of us, you know, are I know I didn't have that. I had to pay out of pocket for those things, right? And then the other piece was, if I didn't have a partner that didn't have that, then I was definitely struggling. So, you know, there's pieces of this midwifery journey that I think that are wonderful and you know, historically are beautiful, right? But there's pieces of this midwifery journey that we sometimes dare not talk about because I don't know why, honestly. I had a conversation just the other day with a midwife of 40 plus years, and she was talking about having 40 plus years ago had to work 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. Home birth midwifery and also a side hustle, she called it. She talked about, you know, a midwife, her senior, when she was becoming a midwife that she sat under, that had to stand in the line, you know, and go house to house and say, hey, you know, I guess back then you know, partners or dads or whoever's in the home with these, who's working in the home with these birthing individuals, listen, it's pay week. You know, can I have my $25 for the birth? I mean, these are the struggles. Insurances are not paying us properly if we're charging insurance. We have to wait for payment plans for you know, a majority of the time. So I'm not saying all of that to say that, you know, don't do home birth midwifery or what have you. But when you step into this space, you better be damn sure that this is what you want to do. Number one, and you better be damn sure that you do it. Hello, well.
I've definitely learned so much from,
because.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
There's like a delay, so I didn't know I was talking over.
Oh, no, it's okay. Sometimes that happens in these spaces. You want to do it really well. You know, you don't, because let me tell you, when you're out there and you're not physically feeling like you want to do this, you're in a mental space. Maybe you had a disagreement with your partner that you couldn't finish because you have to go to a birth. Or maybe your partner's feeling a little like, well, you know, I haven't seen you all week. You know, and they don't really know how to put those feelings into words to describe that to you. They don't want to make you feel bad for your job, but your job is, or your position is imposing on our relationship. There's a lot that goes into this midwifery thing that we don't talk about. And people say, oh, Takiya, why are you retiring? Or why are you walking away from midwifery? Well, in the words of Tabitha Brown on Instagram, it's my business, number one. Number two, the reality of it is that there's no golden age for retirement. Let's just say that, because were we supposed to work unto death? That's number one. That's number two. And then number three is, when you look at the work, you have to be in your soul prepared for the work. I'm getting goosebumps. You got to be prepared and willing to handle the responsibility, because this work is a soul work, that I like to say. We are ushering souls into this world, and we better make sure that we're out here taking great care to do that. We don't need to be in the business of scarring people and traumatizing people because we are internalizing and dealing with the struggles or in the joys of midwifery and really don't know how to place it in our own selves. So I make sure I say that, because people look at me and say, well, you're young, you should be retiring. I told myself that when I wasn't getting a good taste in my mouth anymore, when the struggle was too hard, I was going to step away. Now, whether it was going to be stepping away for a long period of time or indefinitely, the reality is I needed to step away, because I wasn't in a place where I could safely say that I was a good person to usher a soul into this world. That midwife that I was telling you about, that talked about 40 years of being in practice, and she's still practicing, by the way, she said to me that in the olden days, they used to tell her that midwives were called to the practice either if they were born with a veil, so in call, or if they had this, this sense, of being a special person that can, sense things. And I really truly believe that. But I believe that in order for us that are out there that are called to this work, we need to make sure that we covet it, and we need to make sure that we protect it wisely, and that we are in the way that we're doing that, we also are doing the same for ourselves. So it's so important, because what we're talking about is some serious work. It's serious work, what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I particularly, how I was finding my preceptors was mostly about how they live their lives. It was all the midwifery stuff was going to come, but I was curious, like, well, how'd you get a house? And are you married? How did you stay married? Are you taking your kids to school? What is your personal life like? That's a big reason why I was still apprenticing in New York, even though I couldn't practice as a CPM in New York. I needed to know, what was your day-to-day life, and how do I keep a personal life with midwifery, and what does that look like? And I think the organization skills, I mean, I'm also Capricorn, Takiya, so I feel like that just, when Sophia was talking about the spreadsheet, everyone has a spreadsheet in for me. And that's the part that comes easy to me. But the other part is the managing the social life and being able to still have yourself feeling full. Can you talk about, or anyone talk about, the biggest strategic barriers to providing care as a home birth midwife in your location? For example, supervision and collaboration barriers for obtaining medication for your clients.
Yeah, I can talk about this. I'm in Pennsylvania, where being a certified professional midwife is unregulated. There's a statute from 1929 that says we should be regulated if they've never written regulations. Meanwhile, over the border in Jersey, I have a license with a mediocre scope of practice. It's better than Maryland, but no breaches, no VBAC, no twins. Mm-hmm. And it's a mess. I think, it is, I'm really fortunate, like other midwives before me, like introduced me to some of the relationships they had with friendly doctors and nurse midwives in the hospital, and informal relationships that have definitely been aided by whiteness, have allowed me to like have some collaboration and consultation to do my job. But anytime I'm like, 15, 20, half an hour outside the city, I don't have those relationships. So it is really difficult for me to get a consult. It is difficult for me to get a stat ultrasound unless I have someone formally in backup care, which means they need to have private insurance for this one particular practice. And then I have to be able to text the midwife who's on. So there's just a lot of barriers sometimes to getting like aspects of care my clients need. I'm able to like file birth certificates and do all that kind of stuff. But then there's like other state paperwork that sometimes my clients have issues when I sign off on. And so then they're kind of like, it's a rock and a hard place because it's really, really hard to get collaborative relationships in PA and in New Jersey where I have a license. I mean, getting meds is annoying, but not impossible because of my Jersey license, but I have to like have them shipped to New Jersey and then get them over here. And in New Jersey where I can legally practice, the hospitals are pretty hostile generally and are pretty closed off to any kind of consultation or collaboration, which makes transfers like more stressful and scary. Every single time I've transferred in New Jersey, I'm like, I get grilled and asked who my backup doctor is, and we're not actually required to have backup doctors. So then like, I think every single time I've transferred in Jersey, I've come close to being reported for things that are not actually required by my license. It's really, really stressful. Like I constantly, I wonder what it would be like to be a midwife that could like just do our job, you know, but I feel like in the US, like being treated with respect during childbirth is like not a given or like kind of the mainstream. And then like, so home birth in itself is like not a given and something we really have to fight for. And like the labor is a lot on home birth midwives to kind of like be willing to like keep up that fight. And I think the job is hard enough as it is. And like, I feel like that's the thing that I get scared of burning out from more is just like what it's like to kind of have to navigate all these different health systems with different perceptions of like me. And yeah, that would just make it harder to like just provide safety to families.
Thank you for telling us about that. We all have such different, you know, the 50 states being, and Puerto Rico too, like being such different, like regulations, I guess I want to say. I live in the Bay Area, California, which is, you know, it has its pluses and minuses. Like the hospitals are all very used to home birth. There's a lot of midwives here. So there are things that they're used to. Like we are able to do pretty good concurrent care with Kaiser. So I'm appreciating that Kaiser is able to say like, to clients, you want to have a home birth, that's fine. We'll still do your labs. We'll still do your ultrasounds that you need. And then I've had OBs when my clients tell them that they're interested in doing home birth or they want to do home birth, just like drop them completely and be like, oh, you can't come back here, which is a struggle because when they need something for insurance, like I had a gestational diabetes client need a non-stress test. She couldn't go back to that same doctor unless she lied and was like, hey, I haven't felt my baby move. And then that's when the insurance is like, oh, well, because you just showed up at the hospital, right? That's when we'll actually give you care, but you can't, like, you don't get that continuity with that same doctor because they'll just fire you as a client. And
Wow.
That's like what I've experienced with like some of the non-Kaiser hospitals, not all, but just like some of the networks are really shitty. And we're so bound by insurance. And that's the thing I'm struggling the most with in terms of access is like, especially Medi-Cal, like Medi-Cal doesn't pay, most of the midwives here, we don't take Medi-Cal because it doesn't make sense financially. And so we're trying to like figure out how to get like these low income clients, their labs at a good price, but still keep them in care and like kind of lie, but maybe not. I don't know. It's just, it's rough because clients will get fired for saying that they're having a home birth if they're as honest or if there's any slight maybe variation in their labs that I'm noticing a lot of the OBs are not actually willing to go do the work with the client, but they're willing to fire them. And it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, having practiced in a few states, I was really privileged in the sense that when I went to midwifery school, I got to go for free because I was Black. But then that meant that I was isolated in my experience as a Black person and not protected. So I endured a lot thinking, oh, well, this is midwifery. Like, you're gonna get treated badly. Like, this is just a part of it. And then being Black, it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, this is what the work is. And I was really privileged in the sense that when I finished midwifery school, I was in the state of Texas. That's where I went to midwifery school because California at the time didn't have one. And I couldn't get a white midwife to take me as an apprentice. Like, it was not gonna happen. Like, I literally called 20 midwives, and every single one of them, after butchering my name, was like, yeah, I'm not taking students right now. So I had to leave the state.
Many times I've heard that.
But then the gift was that Texas had the oldest midwifery board in the 50 states. So on the board, there was an unlicensed midwife, a licensed midwife, or at the time it was certified midwife. And there was a doctor that had backed midwives, and there was nurse midwives, and there was practicing midwives and retired midwives on the midwifery board. So it just creates like a feeling of safety as a midwife when you know that that's the body that's overseeing like how you do this work in the state that you're in and how you're regulated. It felt safe. It felt safe to have a lot of skills, and there was definitely a reputation within the community where you could go and introduce yourself at a hospital and say, hey, I'm a new midwife. I just got licensed. I'm gonna be coming here. We're gonna see each other. So we might as well get on first name basis. Don't call the police on me because I'm Black. Yes, I'm licensed. Like, I had to go and like make nice with all these different entities that my clients were gonna have to interface with. And nobody teaches you that part in midwifery school. You kind of have to figure that out. I think specifically as Black midwives, we kind of know that already. Like, let me just cross all my T's and dot all my I's so that I have the least amount of issues. But being in that state specifically, the school I went to, I was taught breech, I saw breech. I was taught twins, how to support twin birth, I saw twin births, I managed twin births. So when I graduated, I had all of these skills, and the state that I was in was like, yes, you can practice all of those skills. You can practice in that way. And to then later on move back to Cali and still be able to use that skill set was a gift. To be able to attend breech births, to be able to walk into hospitals. When I was in the Bay, I did the same thing. There was tons of midwives in the Bay, just like Sophia was saying. There was tons of midwives, there still are tons of midwives, but there's a longer history of midwifery, even within Northern California, Southern California. So like in Northern California, I worked at Planned Parenthood as a float. I worked at oh goodness, I can't remember the name of the center, but it was run by Mama Cat and some other Black birth workers, and they did prenatal care there up until 36 weeks. That was covered by Medi-Cal. We got paychecks. I was underneath a doctor's script so I could sign off meds for clients. So if they needed something for their yeast infection or they needed—
that sounds like a beautiful setup.
Like, it was just like, this is amazing. And then when I moved to Southern California, within 5 years of practicing in Southern California, there was no more twins. There was no more breaches. I couldn't get into a family federally funded clinic to work. No one would hire me. It was like, oh no, we don't do that down here in Southern California. So even within the same state, there could be barriers in how you practice and where you practice. You know, I give thanks for nepotism because that doesn't happen very often for midwives. So when I went into hospitals for transports, I would say, you know, oh, I'm a midwife, I'm bringing this family in. You know, I would call and give report ahead of time, the way that I see my grandmother give report to doctors and nurses. So I knew there was a level of professionalism. I had to speak the language. You know, I couldn't be as lax as it was in the home birth community. I knew when I went into these spaces, I had to present myself as a professional because the families I was bringing in were maybe families that would be treated poorly if they didn't have someone accompanying them, if they didn't have a doula, if they didn't have a midwife. And so I would show up at the hospital and I would, you know, be very, oh, hey, how's it going, y'all? Oh, who's on tonight? Who's the on-call doc? Oh yeah, my grandmother, Mary. Oh my God, you Mary's baby? Absolutely, if that means you don't treat my client right. Yes, I am. I am Mary's grandbaby. Yep, I'm here. Oh, you know, she called my last grandbaby. Oh yeah, oh yay, great. Now can you be amazing and respectful to my client, please? Mm. So it means that, you know, I can't attend breech birth anymore. I miss that. I miss utilizing that skill. I miss being able to offer that to clients that are being told they have to have a C-section because they have an untried pelvis. Like, that's ridiculous to me. It makes me sad that I can't attend twin births anymore unless a doctor comes with me to the birth. And, you know, most of my families can barely pay me, let alone a doctor that's—
And they come and do what? Sit there?
Yeah, to be the license in the room. And it's just like so offensive, like all the different ways home birth midwives you know, they make us work so hard for these credentials and then don't take our credentials seriously. So you constantly have to be showing up in such a way that you are a professional, that you are educated, that you're skilled, that you know a lot, and that you're capable of a lot, but at the same time, you know, you're working in the best interest of your client. So if my clients say, you know, they made me sign this paper at the doctor's office that said, you know, if I'm having a home birth, that they're going to drop me. How do you feel about that? I'm like, I want you to do whatever you need to do to feel good about what's going on in your pregnancy. So if you're like, I really need that doctor, I really need to be able to go to a doctor and get ultrasounds and get the things that you can't give me, I have no ego about that. So you don't have to tell them about me. I don't care if I don't exist to them. I'm about you and the care that you're receiving. And that's a piece that's not talked about enough, I think, in midwifery, in the training up of midwives and preparing midwives, that it could be so very different in the same state, that it could be so very different in different counties. There are counties that I don't serve because it's not safe for me. Because if I go in with a family, we're all getting arrested. And that's just crazy to think about in 2020. But it's a reality.
Let's not get it twisted that the active dismantlement of midwifery is strong and alive. Let's not think that that's not actively happening. Let's not think that, you know, medicalized, you know, birth is not alive and well. And the reality is that if you look, and I've been on state boards of midwifery, every state board had, and if that state has a board of midwifery, number one, but every state board has a medical board. Every state has a medical board. Every medical physician operates in one way. The laws are pretty much synonymous, but it's where midwifery comes into play that you see all of these, you know, these areas of gray, these areas of definitely no, you can't do this if you're this type of midwife or that type of midwife. They have been separating us from the beginning. These authorities have been keeping us quiet and keeping us segregated and taking our voices away since the first time that they started, you know, medicalizing birth. And the reality of it is also is that they have taught the consumers how to receive obstetrical care, or I don't even like that word obstetrical care, but they have taught consumers how to receive pregnancy care, okay? And even if you look back in our history, going to a midwife was like, oh, you went to a midwife because you were poor and you had no other choice, right? You know, there was a time where going to the hospital was prestigious. Going to the hospital was when you went to the hospital, you were somebody. And that is still the idea that being in a hospital setting offers some type of security, some type of, you know, privilege, whether your skin is brown or your skin is of a different color. Being in a hospital setting says to someone, I'm good. But what they don't realize is that these statistics are saying otherwise, right? But we are going to be the ones that are scarred and blamed and put on the state because we ain't never left the state. We ain't never left the state. So how do we change this is really my question. And I think that it starts, number one, with midwives, right? Midwives of all types coming together and saying, let's break down those barriers and let's talk about why there's specific types, because that's bull. Right? That's what we really need to do. But because we have bought into what I like to call a culture of healthcare, right? A culture by which the American consumes healthcare and a culture by which the American provider disseminates that healthcare. We've bought into that idea that it's a consumer-based, like you pay for something, you receive a service, right? But we'll be out here vetting like cake, you know, designers for a wedding or a new pair of shoes, or if something doesn't fit right or look right, we'll bet that to the cows come home. But when it comes down to really looking at the type of healthcare we receive, that's one thing that we'll just say, okay, I'll accept whatever you give me. And that's something that needs to be changed. And we need to now come away from the idea that we as midwives are providing this second class care or this care, and we need to stop talking from that perspective as well. Because I don't know about y'all four, I do know about y'all four because I follow you on social media. We're providing excellent ass care. Bottom line, we out here saving families. We out here putting legacy in people. We out here seeding hope and seeding, abundance in life. But we're out here also struggling to do so. So I want to start like the idea of trying to disseminate this information to people. That's where we need to be at. And we need to also start speaking and operating from a different perspective. Why are we struggling? Because the system doesn't want us to advance, right? Because they never wanted us to advance.
But I've been thinking about from the last panel on power in numbers, right? And there is this attack on midwifery and dismantling it right now, how do we unify together? There's a question in the boxes: as CPM and home birth midwives, what do you need from us as CNMs to bridge the gap and know that you are valued and we want to work with you? I'm looking at that question as how do we get all midwives throughout this entire country and, maybe throughout the entire globe, and to organize on bettering midwifery and working as a unified front.
I can tell you my fantasy on this one. My fantasy is a single unified midwifery credential that is available at community college in the United States, in every state with like full financial aid. Like midwifery is a trade. It is like the second oldest trade in the world. And, I remember years ago, I was talking to someone who had been a midwife for a short time and then quit and was like, midwifery is divided in the United States and it's designed that way. Like there's been a 125-year campaign against midwives in the United States. Like this, the BS that we come across when like a resident's judgmental when I like transfer someone to the hospital and they're like, oh, home birth, you're like, oh, like that's like really, really old when that bias against midwives that were untrustworthy and dirty and this and that. And when in fact, my clients are getting 600 times more postpartum care than anyone would get in a hospital setting because I'm with them from I don't even know how many more increments of 15 minutes. And, for me, midwifery care is about setting people up for good postpartums, which is about setting people up for a better future. And I think we all see that, and we're in it, and it's why, birth matters so much. And that's why we're willing to fight and sacrifice our own well-being. And also, I think I trained in Oregon, where there is a 4.5% out of hospital birth rate. There is a midwifery community that had these quarterly meetings between CNMs and CPMs where they did aspects of learning and talk, had a CPM speaker and a CNM speaker. And not that any of that was perfect, but I was oh, this is what kind of the steps towards collaboration and relationship building look like. And then I come to Pennsylvania where, we're unregulated and could go to jail theoretically. And then CNMs don't have autonomy to practice either. And we're all being screwed by a state that privileges doctors and allopathic birth. But there's just so much gritty, uncomfortable history or barriers to our own well-beings that prevent collaboration. I can tell you where I want to end up, but I think the day-to-day is hard because it means putting aside, my own ego and our own egos and some of the hurt and also some of the judgment to be I need nurse midwives to be able to do my job, especially in a state where it can be really, really, really hard to access parts of the healthcare system. And when I transfer to the hospital, knowing that I can transfer my clients into the care of midwives that I trust, makes a huge difference, especially in the time of COVID where I haven't been able to go and support that transfer. So I don't know if I have any tangible steps, but I know that, the system's going to continue to fail and it's designed to fail. And then we're trying to
it's time to mobilize justice. Or big time,
and it's
time.
Yeah. And I think the pandemic created a lot of opportunities and also it's just the beginning. We need so much more.
I have a fantasy that I'd like to share too, which is kind of two-part. What I'd like to see first on the educational level, I don't think most CNMs ever go to home births. It's certainly not a requirement, but it would really be, I think that's something I'd really like to see, is to have that be a part of CNM education, so that they would be like, okay, this is actually what normal birth can look like, talking about what's possible, right? It's unfair to clients to have this entire swath of care providers not know that there's another possibility and not be able to just give them different types of care. Like I have some good friends who are going through CNM school right now, and one of them was telling me, like, there's 2 ways to catch a baby. One is it's headborn and then you pull it out. And then the second one is the headborn and then you wait a second and then you pull it out. And they don't even know about like waiting, you know, until the next contraction. These are things that aren't even talked about. And so we're talking about creating this workshop, right, where myself and a couple other home birth midwives go through and do a skill share. And even just talk about, like, this birth I was at recently, we waited 2 minutes after the head was born, or like, these are some other things that we can do with the placenta rather than, you know, active management. We can wait. Like, this is what things look like, because it is unfair to have this large section of providers who don't know what we're doing and how it looks. So the education piece is the first piece, so that then the second piece is they can make referrals. Like, if CNMs really trust us in the work that we're doing and know that it's valuable and know like what's possible with home prenatal care and birth care and postpartum care, then they can look at clients and be like, you might be a really good candidate for home birth.
Yes, I want folks to do that so much. Of like, you don't have to be in the hospital. Let's figure out where else you should be.
Right? And that's something we've actually started doing because of COVID. And like Ray was talking about, there is a lot of cool organizing efforts that are starting to happen. And one thing is, I don't know how far it's going, but some of the hospitals are starting to talk to home birth midwives, because there's this idea that like there might be this big wave of hospital births that they might start having to turn folks away. Like, who are the midwives in the community? And if we can keep building upon that, so that if there are good candidates, folks who are interested in natural birth, trying to like ease that transition between CNM care and CPM care, that's my fantasy, like trying to connect us, trying to connect clients with us.
Yeah, all of everything what everyone's saying is like, it's all doable. It's just whether or not folks will do it. That's what it just comes down to. I just really hate that nurse midwives, that people that are studying to become nurse midwives, they can't come to births with me as a student. It's illegal in the state of California. It's not supported. They are not allowed to by the midwifery programs, the nurse midwifery programs. And I've had student midwives and nurse midwifery programs saying, I really want to go to home birth. I want to see what that's like. I want to experience that. But like, we can't count it, or we can't document that I was there, or it's not going to be allowed to be included in my education. Like, it won't be a box that gets checked off. And I'm just like, dang, that's so messed up. Like, there are nurse midwives that want to experience like, what is home birth like? Like, is that something that I eventually maybe want to get into? And the powers that be won't even support it. So it's not even just a history of, you know, oh, this type of midwife is better than this type of midwife. It's actually like in the schools, in the training, like, distance yourself from each other. You're not the same, you're different, and you can't be in the same space, and you don't want to be in that space, or we're not going to support you being in that space. And I'm just like, that just sucks to me, because home birth midwives, we're constantly put in the hospital setting because we have to transport eventually, and we have to know how to be in those spaces and navigate those spaces and be professional in those spaces, and know what's expected, and know, you know, all the different ways that it can go. But that's not even an offering that nurse midwives can have access to sometimes as students. And that is so incredibly frustrating. And what's always fun is when you get to know enough of the healthcare providers in your community, whether they be doctors or nurse midwives, and ever so often you get one whisper in your ear and be like, can I come to a birth with you sometime? And you're like, yes, come on, it'll be so much fun. And you know, I love when doctors come to births with me. Does it mean that they're like, oh yeah, I believe in home birth now, home birth is amazing? Usually not, no, it doesn't. But what it does is it simmers them down in regards to their knee-jerk response to home birth, when their patients bring up the concept of, well, maybe I'm considering home birth, or do you think that's something that I could do or I should do? Which to me is also so very sad when we're still trying to make these huge life decisions and depending on someone else to help us make it. Whereas midwifery, we're not going to do that. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you how to figure out how you're going to be in your pregnancy and how you're going to birth and how you're going to parent this child. I tell all of the families, I'm like, this is the beginning of your parenting, making these decisions. It's not me, it's you. And so when we can collaborate, when we can work together, it's just so much nicer. There's nothing more reassuring and grounding for a family, but also as a midwife, to be able to walk into the hospital and know who the safe providers are and being able to connect with them and then ensure that the client has the best possible birth experience still. Because that provider is like, oh yeah, I get this, I understand this. I understand you couldn't make it happen at home, but we're gonna do our best to keep you safe here, to make sure that you have the best birth possible. Yes, if vaginal birth is possible, we're still gonna make that happen. If it's not, we're gonna do everything in our power to make the surgical birth as gentle and as peaceful and as chill as possible. And I feel like I'm fortunate in LA, that LA is pretty liberal in that way. Like 3 of the hospitals will let me come into the C-section with the family. So it's not just they're going in there by themselves. The hospitals here, they'll ask you, what kind of music do you want in during your surgical birth if you have to have a surgical birth? They want to support what you were trying to create in the home setting. And so it's like all of these different ways that we are teaching as midwives, as providers, the ways that we're creating access for ourselves, but also for the midwives coming up behind us. Like all of it is connected. All of it is connected. Takiya, like I miss having a midwifery board so bad. I miss it because in the state of California, when you transport into a hospital, they can write up, this wasn't a good transport, this midwife did a bad job, she didn't do X, Y, and Z, and then send it off to the medical board, and the medical board can instigate an investigation just off of that. And so I have to be so on top of it and have these connections with these healthcare providers, because when they see me come in the door with the clients, they're like, oh, I don't need to write a report about Rashad. Oh, what have y'all got going on here? Well, it's okay, we're still gonna have a great birth. And I'm just like, ooh, thank goodness. Like, okay, there's a level of you just never get to just stop being a midwife, whether you're a nurse midwife, a CPM, unlicensed, like you just always have to midwife somebody. And when we can work together, it's so much less work for us as individuals, as providers. It's so much less work for the doctors, for the staff. Like I had a doctor recently, and I don't know if this has happened to anyone else, specifically during COVID, called the hospital, let them know what was going on, probably coming in, we should be there within 2 hours, gave them the whole 411. They literally said into the phone, it sounds like everything's okay over there. If they don't really want to come in, they don't have to. I literally put the phone on speaker and I said, could you say that one more time? Because I wanted everyone in the room to hear it, because we had some panicked grandmothers in the corner wringing their hands like, this is taking a long time. Maybe we should go in. Maybe it's time to go to the hospital. And the person in labor was starting to feel that way too. Like, I'm so tired. Maybe I should just go in. Like, I don't know if I can keep going.
It's contagious.
And things, we've given IVs, we've given coconut water, we've done all the things. And it's like, okay, well, let me just give the hospital a heads up. And for the doctor to say, it sounds like y'all are good over there. Like, you don't really need to come in. I was too through. I was so grateful. And then I looked at the client and I said, so what do you want to do? And they were just like, I think I want to try a little bit longer. And they were like, okay, well, if you need us, we're here. Like, we're good. Like, we have a bed for you if you want, but we're here. And then they pushed out their baby 2 hours later. And I have no ego around that. If it needed that, they needed to hear a doctor on the phone say, sounds like you're in good hands, I would have never gotten that 6 months ago. I wouldn't have gotten that before COVID. Even one of my best girlfriends that's an OB that works at the hospital and sometimes supports some of my clients, they're not going to say that over the phone in the midst of a transport. So for that to be the thing that reassured that client in their birthing and feeling like, okay, I can go ahead and have the birth that I want to have, that's a beautiful example of, sometimes we put the pit or the IV bag on the wall, like we might need this, but because you put it up there, you don't need it. That's kind of what happened there. Like them hearing like, oh, I might have to go to the hospital, but then hearing the doctor be like, well, it's okay. If that's what makes it okay for you, if you love it, I love it too. But people need to have those opportunities. Nurse midwives, home birth midwives, they need those opportunities to be able to say, yeah, I think maybe we should do this other thing, and have the other providers go, you know, it sounds like you guys are good. I'm affirming what y'all got going on over there, but if you want to come, we will gladly receive you. Both ways. Home birth midwives sending people into nurse midwifery care because something's come up in the antenatal period where it's like, this is maybe not a good idea for you to have a home birth, and then vice versa. You know, you can absolutely have a hospital birth here with me. I would love to have a hospital birth with you. But if you think maybe you want to be at home, here's some of the midwives that I know. Here's some of the midwives that I've worked with.
Thank you guys for sharing that. I know we're at time. I'm thinking of it. I was ending a lot of the panels with us thinking on what reproductive futurism looks like for us. And so in these next 2 minutes, I want you to close your eyes, take in a deep breath and exhale. And what do you see in the future for your home birth practice? What do you see in the future for home birth midwifery? What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you feel? What are you hearing? Where are you? What does that look like? Whenever you're ready.
I think for me, since my journey has ended, what it looks like is being in a space where I can support others to do that same thing, where I can support others to feel safe to be the midwives that they are called to be. It looks like having a relationship with EMTs, paramedics, hospitals, other nurse midwives in other settings, doctors. It looks like a team that works collaboratively together for the betterment and the advancement of the family, for the people who we are serving. It's not self-serving, it's not selfish, it's not biased, it doesn't include any of our judgments or our thoughts. It includes only the thoughts and needs of the family. And so that's what I aspire to create a new midwifery, a midwifery that is unencumbered by the stressors that this society brings, that is free to be the art and the science that we are, to walk alongside people as they usher new humans into their lives. And so that would be what I breathe, what I taste, what I feel, and I'll do it until my dying day.
Anyone else want to share what the future looks like for them? For us?
I have a lot of gratitude. I give thanks for Takiya and the midwives that are showing the healthy way of transitioning out of midwifery, because for so many of us, it's watching our elder midwives work until they die. So modeling not only healthy midwifery and healthy living, but eventually being able to model the healthy transition out of midwifery, not having a cell phone anymore. That is my dream, is to literally not have a cell phone anymore. That just made me so excited. Oof. I literally just want to pigeon and put a little note in it and be like,
just toss it in Atlantic.
Thank you for lunch. You know, I dream of being on call in a really gentle way for the midwives and community that need an extra set of hands when they know that maybe a birth might need an extra set of hands that are a little older, a little more seasoned. Being able to welcome tired midwives into my space and provide restoration for them. That's something I'm actively working towards. Building a nonprofit around it. And just rest, lots of rest, curating rest for myself, curating rest for midwives, for birth workers. Because no matter how bomb it is in the future, we will always still need rest. We will always give in ways that require very intentional rest. And so that's what I see for the future, is midwives having access to rest and having access to support and being that support, and not feeling like I'm shouldering a community. I'm more of just available and accessible should they need me, and out there in the world doing lots of other things like surfing and swimming and not being on call.
Thank you guys for sharing. I wish we could sit in this space forever. I want to always be in the presence of midwives during these days. And I truly am humble to know each and every one of you, and to be able to lead in you guys' footsteps in the future. And those students who are also watching, other midwives who are watching, you guys have really, at least in my eyes, prepared me to figure out how I want to be a midwife. Even you, as Sophia, I know you're just starting, but I've been watching since, and looking forward to following along what that looks like. I want you guys to enjoy your day, and yeah, continue dreaming and seeing what that future looks like for us. Bye.
Thank you all. This has been a lot to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for having us.